Hey guys, this is Courtney from Will's Bloom, and this is the AstroBiz podcast where we talk about astrology and business. And Will's Bloom is the parent of this podcast, and it's all about intentionally designing our life and business with the cosmos. All right, guys, today we have Gabriella from Soul Getters on the podcast, and I'm so excited. She's currently in my business astrology course, and it's been so much fun working with her and her business because she's doing some incredible work helping people tap into their intuition and use also subconscious techniques like EFT and NLP in her work, really helping her students become more spiritually conscious. So I'm so excited for her to talk about these things within the context of her business and how she even got started. And I hope it will inspire you guys who want to start a spiritual business that yes, you can do it. There are people out there who need your skills and people who will be glad to pay. So Gabriella, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hey, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm thrilled. So I want to jump straight into your story
hmm
and pretty much just discover how you ended up in the spot that you're in right now.
Yeah, so my journey really started from birth, essentially, like from the time I was old enough to sleep on my own. So I was really probably only a few months old. My mom says I would wake up and I would be pointing to the corner of my bedroom and I would just be screaming. And she knew, she's like, that wasn't just a scream like you were hungry or your diaper needed to be changed. She's like, every time my parents heard it, they thought I was like getting taken by somebody or something. And so that really, I feel like those set the theme for like my childhood. A lot of times I feel like as adults, we think this whole spiritual realm is really cool. But for me, and especially back then, like spirituality wasn't really something that was, I don't know, really accepted and like talked about. Like my mom and my grandfather always read books on like Sylvia Brown and John Edwards, but still, it really wasn't all that well known. And from my childhood, I was terrified. Like, I remember even like changing and feeling energy around me. So I remember I would like cover myself because I was like, people can see me. There's people watching me. And I was probably like 7 years old, but it was just like that feeling of like it almost like if you were younger and you had a sibling in the car and you fell asleep in the car and like that feeling of them staring at you wakes you up. That was how I felt like all the time. And like if I tried to sleep on my own, I would close my eyes and I would feel and see all of these different like people standing around my bed, and it was just terrifying. I was like terrified of the dark because it seemed like most of the stuff happened at night. However, then it started to like outside was like my safety. And then all of a sudden stuff started happening outside, and I was very dramatic as a child. So like my dad and I were playing, I think like football or something outside, and I was in like second or third grade, and I don't really remember. I remember the gist of it, but I remember like running inside, and my parents said like I was freaking out. I was like, I'm never going outside again. There was a man sitting on the roof watching us, and we ended up finding out, or they ended up finding out, it was my grandfather. My dad's dad had died when he was 20, so I never met him, but I guess I described him perfectly, and down to like the fact that he was wearing a red hat, and my dad gave him that red hat right before he died. So that happened. Then I saw my dog, like literally, I remember this one. I was playing basketball outside and my dog was floating above me. And that freaked me out. I was like, oh, hell no. Like, and I was still, it was probably like that same year, like third grade. And I would also hear a little girl who would sing outside. And my mom used to try to like calm me down by saying, like, it's probably just the neighbor because I lived in a neighborhood. And I was like, no. And I remember being on our trampoline with my babysitter, and like we used to play this game where it was like all these different things you had to do, and then it ended with, okay, and now guess what number I'm thinking. And I remember this little girl whispered in my ear, like my babysitter was one thinking of the number and I had to guess it. And it was like so close to me, but it didn't sound like a human voice. Like I guess the best way I could describe it was it sounded like an angelic like voice. It just didn't sound human. And she whispered the number in my ear, and I remember it was the number 9. And I don't know why I listened to it, but I was like 9, and it was right. And in that moment I was like, what was that? But in that moment it didn't scare me, but that little voice was the voice I heard all the time outside. And that was like my childhood, and it scared me and it terrified me. But then I had this other side of me that was like super into soccer and I was playing at a premier level. So I was traveling literally from March on every weekend. I was playing soccer 7 days a week. And so that was my distraction. But it was like as soon as I was using that as my distraction, something else would happen at home. So it was like this constant back and forth. The more I tried to resist it, the stronger it got. I just like couldn't avoid it and I hated it. I thought I was just like this weirdo and the only person in the world like this. And I just viewed it really as like a curse. Um, but luckily for me though, because I grew up in upstate New York, so this is really where like the Revolutionary War was, a lot of like Native Americans. Almost every one of my friends' houses like had spirits in it. Like my house, my parents built. It wasn't like it was an old house, but there were so many spirits in it because it was the land. So it was more of a it wasn't one of those things when like my mom, like my one friend, her mom was super spiritual and actually put me in contact with my like first mentor. But her house had a lot of spirits. She really was right on like the battlegrounds, like where they lived. So it was like when you would talk about it as I got older, people were like, oh, like weird things happen in my house. So it definitely was more accepted, but at the same time, it wasn't like people were really like coming out as like mediums and psychics and all that. But my friend's mom put me in contact with a mentor when I was in like 7th grade, I think. So I was like 11 or 12, however old you are. And that helped me because it helped me like start to realize, okay, I'm not the only weirdo. Like I'm not the only one like this. But at the same time, it was like I was so like into it. But then as soon as I got home, I was like, nope, this is scary again. Like when I was with her, I felt safe. But as soon as I'd get home, I was terrified. And this was like this back and forth game I played like throughout most of like middle school, high school. But so I was en route to play Division 1 soccer, but I ended up having 4 knee surgeries throughout like ninth grade through ninth grade to 12th grade. So that was like my entire high school. Every year I tore something, ended up like tearing every ligament in my knee, which then deteriorated all my cartilage, which then my doctor finally said like, listen, like you're not playing anymore. You're going to need a knee replacement when you're 30. And he's like, that doesn't even happen. Like we wait till you're at least 50. I mean, now maybe technology has changed, but back then that was just how it goes. He's like, you're done. And it was interesting because now, one, having 4 knee surgeries in 4 years, it's definitely a sign. The universe trying to be like, listen, maybe there's another path. But like, and I could feel that in my gut. Like I knew, like with every knee surgery, like more fear was coming in because I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to go through this again." That was painful. I knew that it was like that light within me of excitement for the sport was slowly dwindling away. But it didn't matter because when my doctor told me I couldn't play anymore, even though there was a piece of me that was like, thank goodness, there was a lot of me, my ego, that was still like, no, this is my identity. Like, I worked so hard for this. What are my parents going to think? They're going to be so disappointed. Like, they spent so much money on soccer. Like, what's everybody going to think of me? That I'm just a quitter. And like all of those like ego thoughts that flood your mind. So I feel like that was really like my dark night of the soul. It wasn't that I ever like didn't believe in like I refer to as God. Like I always have had a strong connection. I grew up Catholic. I was an altar server. Like I loved Jesus and like Mother Mary and all that. And it was one of those things where it was just my ego. I was like, I worked so hard for this, and then this happened. When really now I would see it as, okay, like something greater is going to come then. Like now I say, like when one door opens, 2 beautiful French doors open. But at the time, or when one door closes, 2 beautiful French doors open. But at the time, it just wasn't the case. And I feel like though I just shoved it down because it was senior year, and then graduation was coming, and prom, and like all the things. So I was just kind of like, I didn't heal. I didn't process any of it because life moves on, right? But then I went into college and I still needed to be an athlete. I was like, I'm not that good at anything else. Like, I need to still be an athlete. So my personal trainer recommended I try out for rowing. And I ended up walking onto the team, and our rowing coach would have us meditate in the morning before practice. So this was like my first introduction really to meditation. And it didn't work for me though, because it was 4 in the morning. It was freezing. I was in New Hampshire. So all I really could think about was like bears coming out of the woods or like something. Like it didn't work. And I also was still recovering from my knee surgery. So, and like, I don't believe now meditation is like sitting crisscross, but when you're outside, like, and sitting down on the ground, there's really not many other positions you're going to sit in. So my knee was hurting the whole time. So it just didn't work out. And you're just trying not to fall asleep. But I ended up like eventually leaving rowing because It was not for me. And but I remember I was kind of at that moment, like, it's like, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I was kind of just like, well, nothing else has worked. I was reading like a self-help mediumship book, and she was talking about meditation, and she actually had like a meditation script. And I was like, well, I remember him telling us that it can help with like depression and it can help with anxiety. So I was like, I might as well try it again. And then things really opened up for me, and it was really like the floodgates opened. And I think the difference was this time, now I was like, okay, I'm meditating between like my two classes, whatever it was. My roommate wasn't there. So this is my time. If you have something to say to me, you can come in now. Where before it was just like, I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know like you're supposed to protect your energy. I didn't know like you could turn off like spirits coming in. So it was just nonstop. So this really, I feel like, set up those boundaries. And from there, it was really like, I mean, it was definitely still a journey, but it ended up with like all of a sudden I started hearing like people's loved ones giving me messages, and I would write it down and then I would tell them and it was right. And it just progressed and it progressed and it progressed. And then it was my sophomore year, my cousin at Christmas was like, oh, by the way, I told my friend that you're now doing medium reading, so she's going to be contacting you. And I was like, no. I was like, no, 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 this is not happening. But she was like, it's okay. Like, she knows all about you because this has been going on my whole life. So I guess my cousin had been telling her this whole time. And she's like, she's totally into it. Like, she just wants to like see what happens. So I was like, okay. Like, something in me was like, just do it. I was kind of like, well, what do I have to lose, I guess. And so the day of, my aunt told me, like, text her, see if she wants to come to our house for dinner, and then you can do the reading there. And so I texted her, and she was like, well, actually, it's my whole family who's wanting the reading. And I was like, no way. I was like trying to think of any way out of this. I was like, this is not happening. I've never done this. I've only done this in like meditation. And then I'd write things down and just tell whoever it was. I was like, no, I can't do that. But for some reason, I don't know. I think it was like ingrained in me from my childhood. Like, you don't quit. Like, when you commit to something, you do it. So I was like, okay. It's like, even though I was panicking, I remember getting a coffee that was an extra large coffee because I was so, even though I was nervous, I don't like, as if coffee would help me. It was probably making me more jittery, but I just remember because they lived like 45 minutes away. I'm just like in the car, like panicking, praying, like, what do I do? This is going to be horrible. But I ended up like, I walked in and I was like, okay, I've never done this. So, like, I really don't think anything's going to come through. And they were like, it's okay. We've never done this either. So, long story short, though, I ended up being there for like 2.5 hours and it went really well. And I also learned, okay, you need to set a timer because if not, spirit can talk forever. So it went really well. And that really then launched my first business as a medium. And then from there, I quickly realized like, it was great. I was seeing so many people being able to heal. But one, it was really like mediumship is hard, like very hard on your body. Like I like am like I don't know. I honor anybody who does it for like long periods of time because it was to the point where I couldn't do it anymore because my head was just pounding nonstop. It's just it's a different frequency of work. And I started seeing though like the biggest picture for people and I was like, okay, like yeah, hear from your loved one, but like what about your life? Like there's so much more we can do here. And like that was what really excited me. So it started to really merge into something different. And then finally last year, so like 2019, I finally really got serious about it. And that's when I launched my brand Soul Getters, which is like really like helping people from that spiritual, soulful perspective, but also teaching them to also find that balance and take action. Because I feel like that's something I ran into a lot was a lot of like spiritual people who weren't really grounded. And I didn't resonate with that. Like so many people throughout my journey were like, you don't look spiritual. And I'm like, why? Because I wear like quote unquote normal clothes. I was like, I don't have dreadlocks. Like what? I was like, what do you mean? I don't look what even does that mean? And so I really found a lot of people who are super ungrounded and just like thought they could just sit and meditate. And like, I was like, but you're on earth. You're here to experience earth. Like, you're here to make an impact. And that's why you're not making the impact you should be making or you could be making because you're not taking the action that's also needed. So I've really like dived into that of like learning. Like, I love all things woo and like so into everything with it. But I also know like, okay, but we need to take what we learn and take action. And how are you going to best serve the world and like live that most abundant, fulfilling life? So that's really how it brought me to where I am today.
Oh, that is so cool. I just love how you tell your story, and I feel like you fill it in with such detail that I feel like I'm there. And it was just so captivating the way that you told that. So thank you so much for going into that. And I
Yeah.
just want to say, looking at your chart, I see so many things come up as you're talking because I know that I've given you a reading before,
Yeah.
but you have your sun in Capricorn, which really just shows the need to feel grounded and the need to actually take the practical action to have a greater impact. So, Capricorn is all about leaving our impact and our legacy. But the funny thing is, it says in the eighth house of death and transformation. So, it's no surprise that you were actually able to see and speak to, or I guess connect with, people who have passed over because
Mhm.
your soul and your ego are in the eighth house of death. So you're like kind of in between realms in a way. Like you
Yeah.
are the connector. And I definitely think that that reflects a lot in your work. And then also the eighth house is about working through the deeper insecurities that are holding us back. And so
Mhm.
you're able to then take that expression of your chart and infuse that into your work today, where you help people work through the ungroundedness or anything that is holding them back from their true impact on the world, and really help them transmute that and transcend that. So I love that. I love what you do. I'm so excited about everything. And I actually had a mediumship reading before, and because my dad passed away when I was really young, and there was a lot of mystery surrounding that. Like my grandma thought he was killed, but my mom said he committed suicide, and I didn't really know what really happened, and it
Mhm.
bothered me. And it was such a sudden event that I guess I wanted that closure. And so I saw a medium not too long ago, and I was speaking with her about it because it just fascinated me, the ability to communicate and to know all those really intimate details. Like there's no way. I just sat down and she just started spewing information at me. I was like, whoa, there's literally no way that she could know that without being connected to him. And it was so crazy. And I think that's super cool that you can do that. But one of the things that we talked about was how exhausting that is. And
Yeah.
she had to, honestly, she had really expensive prices. And I think it was because otherwise you just get so burnt out. And I think that she was talking to me about this, like how there was a time where she really saw it as a blessing and a curse because
Mhm.
you have this incredible ability and you want to help people with it, but at the same time it's very draining to you and your energy, and it
Mhm.
requires so much of you. And so I really want you to speak about that, about how you protect your energy, because a lot of people I know are interested in starting a spiritual business
Yeah.
but don't really maybe have those boundaries set up yet to work with
Mhm.
clients, and like creating more of that safety for themselves so they replenish their energy. How do
Yeah.
you go about doing that, and what's your advice for that?
Totally. And I feel like just being in a spiritual business, I mean, even if you're not, like, there's so many people who are so empathic and like take on so much energy. But if you're going into a spiritual business, chances are you're like that much more sensitive to that type of energy because you naturally want to help people. Um, and that was something that, oh yeah, like I was burnt out. Like it's a lot. Even when you're not doing mediumship, even if you're doing like anything, like it's still a lot. But first things first, I think that's the most important thing is to address like you're not protecting your energy out of fear, right? Like for so much of my life, I lived in fear. I was terrified because I saw energies that were what I guess I could have perceived to be very scary, and like I could feel things, and I it just terrified me. And I allowed the fear really to like get to me. And so I for so long was like putting up protection out of fear. And I couldn't understand why energy would still come in and energy would still like affect me. And I was like, I'm putting up all these protections. Like, what is even happening? And it was because I was doing it from a place of fear. So think of your house, right? Like, or like, let's just pretend you lived in a bad area just to make it even like, I mean, well, it doesn't really matter. But just in general, like when you go to bed at night, do you leave your front door wide open? Like no, I would hope not. And you probably lock it, and you don't lock it out of fear of like, oh my god, like somebody's going to break into my house tonight. No, you lock it just because it's smart. Like If you don't and you leave your front door wide open, like, you're asking for somebody to come in and steal things, right? And, like, you can't really blame anybody, like, because you allowed them to walk on in. So think of your energy in the exact same way. Is you're not protecting yourself out of fear, you're protecting yourself to be smart, because at the end of the day, there are people, whether they're aware of it or not, who will take advantage of you and overstep boundaries. And usually, if they're overstepping boundaries, most of the time they're not even aware of it. They're just really in need of like healing in your light. But I mean, there are narcissistic people out there, and that's okay too. They're teaching us lessons, but it's just to be smart. Like, not everybody is worthy of taking my energy, and like nobody's worthy of taking your energy, but like you get what I'm saying. So it's being smart. It's just I'm protecting myself because I honor my light. And I know that the more I am grounded with my energy, the more I can serve the world. So from there, once you kind of get that understanding, I feel like there's so many different ways you can go about really protecting your energy. I'll give you a few that I do every day. So turning on and turning off my light has been like the most powerful. So essentially in the morning, you just start with your hands in prayer position. And then you lift, like you bring your arms. I know you guys won't be able to see me, but you bring your hands like all the way to the top of your head, sweep all the way down to your feet, and then bring your hands up your legs and like back to prayer position. So that's like you're turning on your light. And that's setting the intention, because like, and this is something that I heard in actually an energy session once with a client, was your light is the most powerful protection that you have. It's the strongest protection you have. When you're operating at that super high frequency, nothing can get to you. Those lower frequencies are so slow, right? Like when you don't feel good, when you feel angry or sad, you feel tired and you feel like super low vibe. But when you feel good, you're super excited and you have all this energy. So think of it in that sense. Like when you're at that low frequency, or when there's energies at a low frequency, they're not going to be able to get up to you. They're going to have to try to bring you down to their level by like fear and like whatever else. So when you're up at that level, like you are the most powerful, grounded, love filled, all that good stuff. So that's like turning on your light. But at night, you want to go the other way. Starting at the prayer, go down the stomach, down the legs, sweep up to the top of the head and back to the prayer position. And what that's doing is it's turning it off. Like think of a light in the summertime at night and how bright it is, but think of all the bugs that swarm it. At night, all of us are like traveling and doing whatever. So we want to make sure we just turn it off. And if you forget to and you're almost asleep and you're like, I don't want to get back out of bed, just set the intention like, okay, let's turn off my light now. But that one has been the most powerful for me because, two, it's really empowering. It's like I'm standing in my power and I'm turning my light on. But also, you could call on Archangel Michael. Just like, thank you, Archangel Michael, for surrounding my energy with love and light, ensuring like I don't take on anyone's energy today, something like that. Whatever resonates. I'll also work a lot with Mother Sister Jaguar. So she is more of a shamanic practitioner that I go to has taught me about her, and she's really like a protector. Like she's a jaguar. Like I envision her like just like encircling my energy field all day long and being able to like swat away anything that's going to try to like enter that is not of my highest good. So you can also welcome her and thank you for surrounding me. I call her on her all the time. Like if I'm on a run, like on a trail, for instance, and I'm by myself, thanks for surrounding me, like just ensuring that like nothing sketchy could even happen. If like I'm going to bed at night, I ask her to surround my bed, our home, all the time. So those are three really powerful ways. But if you do have an office, I would take it a step further, just because like you might not like give your energy away, but you also don't want to bring in anyone else's like energy that they no longer need either. It's a little bit of a like they could have had like they could be the best person in the world, but they could have had a fight with like their husband or wife that morning. So now they're carrying that energy with you, and you don't want that in your office, right? So what I do is like, I mean, I don't have an office now because I work online, but even at my front door, I just have like a little Ganesh head. So like he's what, a Hindu god, I think, the Lord Ganesh, and I just have his head, and I just like have it right by my front door. So he's really good with that, like ensuring like he'll kind of keep anything else away. But when I did have an office, also I would envision there's of course a door on your office, but I would envision a pink screen as if there was like another screen door, and what that screen would do is kind of act like a net. So anything that was love, of their highest good and of mine could enter my office, but anything that wasn't needed to stay on the other side. And when they left, that energy would leave with them. So that is something I feel like that's really important too, just to make sure, because that's your sacred space, right? You don't need anything else lingering around afterwards. So I feel like if you can go like do some of those tools, take what resonates, but those have been the most powerful for me, and it makes a world of difference.
I love all of those. Thank you so much for sharing. I love the ritualistic aspect of moving and sweeping the body with your hands. And I also really love the jaguar visualization because I feel like it just kind of feels like a badass, like, get out of
Yeah.
here. You're not allowed in my here. And I
Right?
think that's so cool. And these are all really, really useful techniques. And I just wanted to bring one thing back to your chart when you mentioned having a lot of fear around these different energies and not really being able to, I guess, see what's like good or what's bad, you just kind of everything is scary because it's unknown. That
Mhm.
definitely comes back to having Saturn in the 12th house. So the 12th house is really where the ethereal realm meets the earthy realm. And Saturn here actually can place a lot of fear. Like it depends on how it is in your chart, but oftentimes where we have Saturn can show where we have some kind of fear in our life. And so for you, that came up in the way of these spirits where you were, somewhat in the ethereal realm and placing fear on that interaction. And actually part of Saturn's development is that when you get older, it's like you become a lot better at working with your Saturn. It's like you kind of master that
Mm.
energy. And so it no longer becomes like a fear or as much controlling you. And so I think that that's really cool that you've, I guess, had that challenge because now you've developed these new skills that you can now teach other people about how to protect your energy, how to create love when maybe fear is your initial first reaction. I think that's huge. And also talking about the density of energy when comparing fear to love. I love that you're talking about this because I was just reading this book that I've mentioned many times now, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself,
Yeah.
where he goes into the quantum physics, like the science behind the density of energy and how it becomes so much lighter and the wavelengths become like so much faster
Mhm.
when you're vibrating at love frequency versus fear or hate. And you're right, you become untouchable because you're literally vibrating at a different frequency. So it's not like you can directly impact that person or that thing unless you change your thoughts to become a lower vibration thought and get down to their level. So it's really empowering to have these tools in our back pocket. And I'm wondering because I think a big part about energy protection and keeping things like separate from your clients and not taking things on. I think a lot of that also stems into having equal energetic exchange. So like not working so much and not getting paid for it and you feel kind of like depleted energetically. So I would love for you to talk about this because I know in the spiritual community a lot of people are like, "Oh, don't charge or don't
Yeah.
charge a lot." And I think that that is so insulting because we are human beings and we need sustenance. And I want to hear your take on it and how you've navigated this from your start of your business to where you are now.
Yeah, no, totally. That's such a good question because I feel like it's so important. And like somebody had told me once, like, okay, well, what's the difference? Like, you're viewed as a healer or whatever in the spiritual realm. So, what's the difference between you and a doctor? Like, you're doing the same, like, you're still providing healing, and a doctor's making like $500,000 a year. So, like, why are you any different? Right. And I do think some of it comes from probably us living other lifetimes where we were nuns and like priests, or like money just wasn't as big of a thing back then, so it wasn't really as big of a deal. It wasn't really needed in as high quantities or whatever. But yeah, so when I started, because when I started, I was still in college and I was just doing this on the weekend, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll charge $50 an hour. I thought that was a lot of money when I was 20 years old. I was like, okay, like $50 to just do this, because I thought it was so fun. I was like, to do this and get to help people, like, sure. It was just like an extra $50. And I quickly realized though, like once college came to an end for that year, that spring, I was like, wait a minute. When I'm working at the ice cream place I work at, I'm making way more money. And at this point, I was starting to see, I was like, oh, I could make a career out of this. Like once school ended, I was filling up every week. Like I was booked out weekends because like I was only able to do it on weekends. But then all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, like now every day's filled. And I didn't like doing more than one a day because it was so draining. But then I started because I was like, wait a minute, if I want to be making enough money to even leave my job at the ice cream place, I'm gonna need to see more clients. For some reason, I was like, I can't raise my prices. I tried raising my price, which I did. I raised it to $75. I raised it by $25. And that was like a big deal. I was very nervous because at that point, it was like, the people were referring people, and that's like just how it was all referral based. So they would say, oh, it's only $50 too. And for me now, I'm like, why is it only $50? Like what is like, so I was probably also not attracting people who really honored me, right? Because they were like, oh, like almost in that sense, kind of like not intentionally, but it's almost like coming off as that like using like energy of like, oh, she's only charging $50, like almost like they're getting something out of it, or like stealing in a sense. Not literally consciously, they were great people, but like how they would say it, that's kind of what energetically it equated to. And so when I first tried raising my price, and for some reason, 'cause I had no idea like how to run a business, I remember posting on my Facebook page, I'm like, okay guys, because there's like such a like high demand, and like I explained everything, I'm gonna be raising my price to $75. And I was like, why did I ever even announce that? I don't know. But I did. And I had a woman message me, and she was like, if you're really spiritual, why are you even charging? And I was like, that like rocked my world. I'm like a 20-year-old just trying to help people. And I was like, oh my God, should I like, and I knew I should be charging, but at the same time, I was like such a people pleaser. I was so like insecure. Like this was a very big deal for me to even admit that I was doing this stuff because I was always thinking about like what are other people thinking of me? And so for her to say that, it was like in the back of my mind, and it was a block that I've worked through even when I raised up to like 150 an hour, up to now like 200 an hour. Like these things were just very like in the back of my mind, and it was a very big block because had to work through it. And I was like, it became something of like judgment once again. Well, people think I'm doing this for the wrong reasons if I raise my price. And at the end of the day, it's like we're all abundant beings. And like that was like a really great tool or way of looking at it, was when somebody first said to me like, I mean, I don't have a child, but like you kind of get the point, right? Or like the person you care about most in the world, you want them to be the happiest, the most successful, the most abundant version of themselves, right? Like that's a given. Like if you have a child, I'm sure you're totally like, oh my gosh, like I want them to never have any money worries. So what if you start like thinking of like that God or angels or whatever it is that you believe in? Think about them. They want the same thing for you. It's working through that like ego, and it's working through the fact that money really is nothing more than just an energetic exchange. And I learned that when I was charging, like I think when I stopped doing mediumship, I stopped charging, like I was still at $75 an hour, and I was seeing 5 clients a day, 5 days a week. Like, no wonder I was like, I remember my last session before, like, because the universe kept telling me, like, I'd hear in meditation, you need to stop doing mediumship. Like, you've outgrown it. And it's like really, it was very bad. Like, there was nights where I just had my face in my pillow because my head was just like throbbing. Nothing helped. No ibuprofen. Like, nothing helped. And I kept hearing it, but I was like, I don't want to disappoint people. Like, what are people going to think? Once again, that same theme back from like soccer time. And in my last session, I remember I almost passed out. And in that moment, I was like, no, I'm done. I'm done. I didn't know how I was really, like, it didn't really matter because I was living at home. But I mean, I still had bills to pay. And at that point, I was renting in an office, and it was like $500 a month. And that was like, or it was maybe 700. I don't even remember. But that was like so much money for me back then. I was like, I'm not going to be able to pay it. Like, I was so worried. But at that point, I remember I messaged everybody. I called all my appointments that I was supposed to do, and I was like, I'm sorry, but I can't do it. Like, and I stopped. And sure enough, I was supported. But because my energy, it wasn't exchanged properly, it was like, think of a car. You can't drive forever without filling up a tank of gas, right? That's what was happening to my energy field. I was just like running on empty, and it just got to the point where my body was like no more. So think of your body at like money as like that fuel in a sense, because at the end of the day, like even when I barter with people, like I love bartering, but at the same time, when I barter, for instance, like if I'm getting an energy healing session, I don't know what it is, but there's such a big difference of when I'm bartering and when I like actually am paying for the service. I feel like I get so much more out of the service for some, like because I'm not then also giving my energy. Money is just like a really great amplifier. It's a really great tool that can help us do really great things in the world. And I really do feel like in your business, money is that fuel that's going to fill your tank back up. So look at it more, not in a way of like, oh my gosh, I need it, but more of just like how you fill up your gas. Like you don't really think much more of it, of like whenever you fill up your gas, if you do it at like half a tank, if you do it when it's on empty, whatever, like, but you don't think much more about it. You just know you have to. So think of money in the exact same way. And I feel like that will help a lot because I know it's very hard at first. And I know there's the stigma. I don't even know why there is that stigma. I think it's just from like the church and like all of it, but we're breaking out of that now. And think it like my first coaches, that's what they said. The more money I have, the more spiritual I can be, therefore the more I can help the world. Because the more you have, the more you can give back. You're a great person. Like you know you're going to give back. And also, why does it matter? Like why can't you have that nice purse or that fancy car? Like if you want it, you like want it for a reason. And you would want your very best friend or your child or your significant other to have all the things that they want. So why are you any different? And I think once you get it into that perspective, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. And you know who I want to have a lot of money are spiritual people, because those are the people
Yeah.
who make a big impact on the world in a really beautiful
Mhm.
way. And I'm really sick of, the guilt around wanting money. I'm so sick of it,
Yeah.
especially the spiritual community, because there are so many people out there who will make that money at the disadvantage of other people. But people in the spiritual community are helping other people. And then when they make money in return, they can continue to have a greater and greater impact. And I think that's all coming down to the mindset of, if I have money, then this person has less,
Yeah.
and not just not true. Like money, I always say this, but money is something that is cyclical, or it basically is like rain. So it just keeps going through a cycle. So that doesn't mean it runs out. So when someone else gives you money, it doesn't mean that they don't have money. They have ample opportunities to make that money back. So it's
Mhm.
just like you said, an exchange, an energetic exchange that's constantly happening between people. And it also encourages people to value the service that they're receiving
Yeah.
and show up in a different way when they put more money towards it, because that's what we equate to an exchange. And so they feel like, oh, I need to really show up here because I put this down. And it's more like a commitment to themselves
Yeah.
than it is really about the other person receiving it,
Oh,
even though you
totally.
receive it because you need it.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, even I know, like for myself included, like I've always invested in like coaching and stuff like that, but I've noticed it more of like energy healing. The more I go to like commit to going to energy healing sessions monthly, the more like one you feel so much better, but also I have found like so you might be afraid at first because like for me at first when I was spending money on like other services, it was like that fear mindset of like what you said, it's always like going to come back to you, but I didn't know it at the time. And at first it was like that fearful like, oh my gosh, like if I spend this, almost like it's lost forever. And I quickly realized though, like, no, when I'm investing to better myself, like for instance, like even just like things like organic food or new, like different supplements and just like all of those things, or if you're investing in like a new outfit because you know it makes you feel really good, like it could be anything, it comes back tenfold because now you're like excited about money. Or like when I invest in the energy healing sessions monthly, like my business like doubles that month because like I've noticed the difference. And one, yeah, of course, because I'm now keeping like I'm really taking care of my energy on a whole new level. But also, I really believe like when you're investing in bettering yourself and your energy field, it's raising your vibration too, which when you're at a higher vibration, of course, you're going to be able to allow more money in because it's just like I don't know, you're just operating at like a high frequency of like, let me bring in as much as I can, right? Everybody wants to be around that person who is like super happy and feels really good. Think of like money coming to you in that same way. I don't know very many miserable people, who are like thriving financially. I mean, I'm sure there's the exceptions, but it doesn't usually work like that. Usually, like when, especially in the spiritual realm, I would say, like when you're super upbeat and you're super happy and loving life and just like seeing money as just like almost like your very best friend. Like you don't need to check in on them every day, like, but you know they're always there for you and you're always there for them and you love and honor them. Like when you start to look at money in that sense, like it's always going to support you. Like I have a name for money, and like I'll check in on, I refer to money as a her, so I'll check in on her like every once in a while. But I think too, something that came through in a meditation once was, think of like money as a relationship. Like you don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who's like, you just left their house and you're like, what are you doing now? Why haven't you answered me? It's been 5 minutes. Like you don't want to be in a relationship with somebody like that. I would hope not, at least. Like that's super obsessive and like just not healthy. And think of money in the same way. If you're constantly like logging into your bank account of like, oh my gosh, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't spend that $5 because like, what if I need it? What if I need that $5, right? Like it's an obsessive energy. But you also wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody who ghosts you for 2 weeks and then all of a sudden is like, okay, actually I do like you. Like don't think of money in that way either. Like you don't want to be avoiding your bank accounts because you're afraid to see your bank account go down, or you're just like embarrassed by the number or whatever it might be. Like maybe it's even the opposite. Maybe you're embarrassed by how much money you have, right? Like there could be that fear. It could be the other extreme. So like finding that happy medium. What kind of relationship would you want to be in? And start to think of money in that same way.
I love that analogy. I think it makes it really simple for people to approach it from a more positive energy, looking at it like this is my friend and this is something I like actually care about and love. But yeah, like you said, not, choking it because you're being too obsessed with losing it. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so talking about, investing in yourself and investing in tools for your business, I was wondering what is one tool or software that you pay for that has really just been so useful for you?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Definitely like services, but honestly, like when I'm thinking about like softwares, I would say a scheduling system. Um, Acuity is what I use, and I honestly like I think it's like the best thing, like because for so long I would just answer like all my emails, all my phone calls, and try to have to schedule people, and I was sending like if there was 3 people who emailed me that day, I was like, I don't know what times to send them because the first person I just sent was only going to use one of those times, but chances are they're going to select the exact time I send to the next person. So it was super overwhelming. And honestly, it took up so much of my day. And also, I feel like there's just such a power. And like, I have it all scheduled where like you cannot work with me unless you pay me first. Because I have found that sometimes people will just not show up. I have found that like it's just also that honoring yourself. Like it's just honoring yourself, and it's honoring like that person. If they're not willing to make that investment before seeing you, they're not willing to do the healing work, they're not willing to be in your space full-heartedly. So that also made things so much easier because now it's a system already takes care of it. So it saved so much of my time. Like if somebody wants to schedule a session and they don't know where to go, I just send them the link and they can choose whatever day. I don't have to send it, like have to figure out what day and time they're going to be selecting. Like they can pay it right there. I don't have to worry about like when I did sessions in person at first, when I just like they would pay me at the end of the session. One, it's kind of like a control thing because technically they're the ones now in control. Even though you're welcoming them into your space, they could technically be like, well, you know what, that wasn't good enough for me, so I'm not going to pay you. I mean, I never had that experience, but when you think about it, there is like a subconscious control thing going on there. You're welcoming them into your energy, your space, and it's not in an ego way, but it's more of just like honoring yourself once again. But also, like there was times where people would be on such a high when they would leave me that they would forget to pay me. And I was so like nervous around money and so like insecure that I would let them leave because I didn't know what to do. I was like, and I didn't want to be like, oh, by the way, pay me because I just didn't know how to like come across. And they sure like every time it happened, like it was only a few times before I realized like, okay, no, I need to say something. But they would like come running back and be like, oh my gosh, like I'm so sorry. But it happened a few times before I finally realized like, wait a minute, I need to do something. And I still didn't take money beforehand. Like, I didn't say, okay, you pay me first and then we dive in, because I felt like it was just so icky. I didn't want them to think I was all about money. So taking all of that away from you, taking that pressure off, it just makes it so much easier. So I feel like that's like my favorite thing I have. Like, it's not even a big investment, but it's just, oh my gosh, it saves so much time, so much energy, so much like uncomfortableness too.
Yeah, I use Calendly and I actually want to switch to Acuity because they allow you to only have a certain amount of an event per week. So right now, like a bunch of people are starting to schedule these astrology readings, and I honestly don't want to do more than 2 a week because I'm doing my course, and that's where I want to put my energy into growing the business and growing the course.
Right.
I love the readings, but it's definitely more of a taxing energy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I love them so much, but it definitely takes a lot. And so I wanted to limit them to 2 week, and Calendly doesn't do that. So I think Acuity is such a great thing to recommend.
Right.
And that's, yeah, I recommend anyone who's doing any kind of service-based industry work, then definitely get yourself some kind of scheduling software like you're mentioning.
Mm-hmm. It
Thank you.
literally changes the game.
Yes. Thank you so much for everything. So where can people
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So my favorite place is definitely Instagram. So it's Soul Getters, SOULGETTERS. My website is soulgetters.com. I have a private Facebook group where we do a lot of like fun free stuff, but also it's a great community. Like if you're wanting to network with people, if you're wanting to just be like, hey, like I'm having all these weird experiences that I'm not used to, like that's your safe place to like talk about it. So that's Ambitious Soul Getters on Facebook. And I also have a podcast, the Soul Getters podcast, which you will be on. Well, we have our interview next week, so I'm super excited for that. So those are like my main places, and I'm also on TikTok, but that's once again Soul Getters. That's just more for fun. So those are like my main places right now.
Yeah, and you guys, she has such an incredible membership that she's actually working on building out right now. And I strongly recommend that you guys go check it out because she has so many resources. And I think that she's going to be putting a lot of those, if not all
Yeah.
of them, in her membership site. And so I'm talking about thousands of dollars worth of courses all in one place for a very small monthly fee. So you guys not only will get the energy upgrades, but you'll also get the community aspect, which is just everything. So please go check
Mm,
it out. I'm telling you, it's going to be incredible. Thank you so much, Gabriella, and I hope
thank
you have a beautiful
you.